All right,
Gordon, is that meant to? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Go
No,
ahead,
go
Pat.
ahead.
well, it's 10:10.
Okay, yes,
So
I'll
it's a
shut up.
great conversation, but it's 10:10. So
Yeah,
let's
gotcha.
start.
And Betsy's with us. Mary's
She
with us.
is, and she apologizes.
No problem.
Hey, it happens to all of us. So
Hey, y'all, before we start, look, I just got a puppy.
let me see.
I saw the puppy on
Oh my
Facebook, and he's even more
That's
adorable.
a big puppy, Courtney.
I'm so excited.
What's the puppy's name?
We haven't named him yet, but it's somewhere between Reginald, which is what my recovery dad used to have a nickname for me. So Reggie and Frank.
Reggie is the name of my puppy that I got in November.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Reggie or Frank?
Reggie or Frank. It's also just so good for me. I know like everybody knows me. It's just like something completely different than work and school and politics. So I'm very excited about it.
Puppies are good. Thanks for sharing, Courtney. The puppies are good. I love puppies, although I don't own one. All right. So I welcome all of you. I welcome all those online that are listening in. And there's only one item on the agenda, but we certainly can add others if people have something. If we have time with all this, I would like to start the discussion on the guidelines of sort of what we can do and cannot do as council members under the Freedom of Information Act. Just start that discussion so we're able to have sort of an educational session for all the council members so we fully understand what our responsibilities are. But that's a sidelight. The focus of today's meeting really is, this has now happened to us twice, where one, we had a tie for the vice chair position, and the second time we didn't have enough votes to move it through. So, which means to say it's not just about this VP position, it could happen in any one of the voting elected positions. So I have a couple ideas in my head about maybe possible solutions, but I'd like to hear from members of the council what their thoughts are on this.
Hang on, I'm writing.
Okay.
I can't talk and write at the same time. Neither one will make sense. Okay, so I've been kind of thinking about this too, and I don't think we gain anything if we don't make some sort of a change. Yeah. Because you're right, Pat. I think this has the potential to reoccur at any time, and so thinking about kind of the breadth of the council's responsibilities, and those are not going to shrink. Those are going to expand. And kudos to you, Pat. I know you're doing yeoman duty, and thank you for that. But I don't think it's fair to kind of think that you're going to do that forever. No offense, but I'm not going to do this forever either. So it occurs to me that maybe there is some sense to create a dual, two vice chairs, for lack of a better way to put it. And the reason being that because the responsibilities of the council / subcommittees of the council is going to expand. I just don't see how it can't. It might make it a little easier if, for example, one of the vice chairs was assigned, if you will, to the program committee, and another vice chair was assigned to, say, the finance committee, so that it spreads some of the attendance / responsibility of the leadership of the council to more than one person. Because let's face it, Pat, right now it's on your head.
Correct.
And so, I mean, I guess that's the way I've been thinking about it.
Yeah. my thoughts on those, Betsy, are that as long as we defined what those, how that went, and in that you have to define which one takes over the responsibility of the chair in the absence of the chair.
Yeah, okay.
And that can be defined in that. So those are the first things that came to my head. Others' thoughts on Betsy's suggestion, or does other people have other thoughts?
Eric's got his hand up.
My thought is that if we're talking that this could happen in any position, what are you going to do if it was the chairperson? You're going to have two chairs of the committee? I mean, that's probably not going to work out in that scenario. So I just don't think that that is a viable solution. As I've thought about it over the last few weeks, I just don't think that we've necessarily found the right person, whether it be Courtney or I, and maybe somebody else needs to step forward. Maybe two other people need to step forward, and just we haven't found the person yet, and that's fine. My suggestion is that we maybe take additional nominations or see if there's anybody else that would be interested in doing it. I know that Bruce said that he would be interested in the last meeting if nominated. I know that there's been, I believe that the lived experience portion is really important. And I don't have that. And I do understand that. And I also think that it is important. In the absence of that, I think many people can't get over that hump with seeing me in that role, which is totally fine and understandable from that perspective. So if that is important, then maybe we choose two people with lived experience and take another vote on those two people. I said it before that I'll do this if asked, but by no means would I stand in the way of what maybe the people of the state of Maine want. Maybe we can even go that far that it's important to the people that we serve that the leadership of the committee have lived experience. I don't have any data to back that up. That's from the heart, I guess. And that's how I feel about it. I don't think having two people in one role is probably a good idea. Just because right now it's the vice chair. What if it's the chair? You can't have two chairs, and it doesn't really work out. So it's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Erica, I have a tendency to agree with you in regards that we can't have two of every position. It's not going to work. So there's two things. One is the chair's responsibility too much, and do we need two vice chairs? But we also need a procedure that when this kind of thing happens, when the council can't come to a consensus on a candidate, what's the next step? So that is something that we need to do, because if I'm not mistaken, and Brendan, please let me, if by reading the bylaws, the council has to have advance notice of nominations. So is there a way that we can do what we sort of did in a more, procedural manner, is when nominations come and the consensus doesn't happen, can we then take nominations from the floor and vote from the nominations on the floor? Because I don't know if we can do that the way the current bylaws state, but that's just the thought in my head.
Pat, I'm happy to address that, but I wonder if you want to continue hearing from the other members first, and then I can go last, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah. Other thoughts?
I kind of wanted to hear from Courtney before giving my current thoughts on it, because I think it's so, she's a candidate.
I was waiting for you, Gordon. So you're first.
You're so polite.
Oh, yes. Well, I think we clearly have two pathways that we could go in making recommendations to the council, and we recognize all we're doing is the preliminary work to make a recommendation for next week's meeting. There's a part of Betsy's proposal that I hadn't thought about that I really like, and that is the idea of sharing some of the load. Our work is going to get even more intense, and right now, I believe that Pat is now on every committee, and it's not fair to her. We're very fortunate that she's doesn't presently have another day job that virtually everybody else on the council, albeit Betsy recently retired as well. But we're just so fortunate that Pat has been able to do that. But I don't think it's fair for this to become like a full-time job. And boy, as we begin, now that we've got at least like 4 committees, it seems to me, we've got the executive committee, the finance committee, the programs committee, and the governance. And then we're going to start, monitoring, doing the spending, dealing with all the procurement. There's a lot to this. So the idea of having 2 vice chairs and working with the chair, dividing up some of that workload so that the chair primarily, I think, not only chairs the meeting, make sure all the voices are heard, but also is our public spokesperson. Pat the other day had to spend time with the HHS committee of the legislature with Attorney General Fry. That's always can be a stressful experience. So that's one thing I like about Betsy's proposal. And Brendan had previously told us, at least for 2 meetings now, that one of our options in getting out of the hole that we're in is clearly to amend the bylaws and provide for two vice chairs, or as many officers as we want. And we'll hear from him more on that in a moment. So I could live with the idea of 2 vice chairs. The other advantage of that is that we know that this election for this has been fairly divisive. And I think I realize this is a public meeting and there's 18 people observing us, it appears. So there's at least, there could be press, there could be other observers who regularly attend the meetings, and that's fine. But it has been a fairly divisive issue, and it's so important, particularly in this period of time between February, and we're only talking about the period from now, February to January, when we have another election, and then we have the appointments to the council and the reappointments in November. So it's a fairly limited period of time. It's a critical period of time as we get our first money out the door and continue to spend. So if having 2 chairs, vice chairs, helps to unify the council in its work, that's another positive. But all of that is premised really on, well, would Bruce and Courtney, both with publicly announced lived experience, be willing to do this? Because we're kind of, if we go to the dual vice chairs and working with the chair on and dividing up those responsibilities, and I'll come to the issue of who succeeds the chair in a moment, then we're really, in my opinion, basing that on an assumption that the 2 people would be willing to do this and be interested in it. Obviously, the other alternative is just to clarify what we can do under the bylaws in terms of taking nominations from the floor and just having another election. One of the there's 2 drawbacks to that. One is it doesn't necessarily unify the council, and number 2, it still could end up without a with neither candidate getting 9 votes. I think that if we amend the bylaws to establish two vice chairs, the issue of who succeeds the chair can be easily taken care of. One of, there's a couple different ways. Obviously, at the time that there's a vacancy in the chair, then the council could at that time have a vote on which of the two vice chairs takes that position. We could an alternative, just thinking out loud, would be the chair having, for whatever reason, to leave that position, would have been working with these two individuals, and he or she could appoint with the approval of the council, so that there would be a real role for the chair in choosing which of the vice chair would succeed. So that's another alternative I'll throw on the table. But that's really all I've got to say about it. I mean, I could live with either approach, but I think Betsy's suggestion is pretty sound. I'm particularly interested in, like I say, sharing the load, because I think the load gets bigger and bigger. Thank you.
Thanks, Gordon.
Hi everybody. I'm gonna try to take this in different pieces. So the first one I'm gonna try to tackle with my thoughts is the thought of succession. I think that a succession conversation comes when there is an absentee in the chairship. I don't know that that's a conversation that needs to happen in this present moment, though I do lean towards the council making that decision when the time comes. I think that that's something we can tackle together later. I like the idea of a dual vice chair for a couple different reasons. The first being that this has been a very contentious topic for the last, we're going on more than a year and a half, almost a year and a half. And at the end of the day, the work of the council is to get the money out to our communities. People are continuing to die. And that's why I serve on this council, not to debate on vice chairs and chairs, etc. I like the idea of sharing the responsibility and helping Pat take some of the load off of her plate. And I worry that if it's me and Bruce up for a vote next month, that not only do we split the council again, we split the recovery community again. And that is not something. Bruce and I have had long conversations about this personally, one-to-one. That's something I do not want to do. I do not want to split the recovery and the reentry community between me and Bruce. That has ramifications outside of this council, and something I don't want to do. That being said, I think there is also around the thoughts around what if this happens around the chairship. I say this just not to discount Pat's leadership or to say anything about that, but what I will say is that there was conversations about putting up a second candidate for the chair, and those conversations ended in, we don't want to split that vote, because at the end of the day, people who use drugs are more important than having that kind of split between the council. And again, I think that speaks to the same thing around this vice chairship. I think that coming together is the most important thing. And the best way to do that at this point is for me and Bruce to both serve. Around roles and responsibilities, I like the idea of one of us being assigned to different committees, so Pat doesn't have to go to those committees and we can report back to Pat. also around like if Pat's not able to chair a Maine meeting, maybe we just go back and forth. Like Bruce chairs one, then I chair one, and hopefully Pat's there in person. But if she's not, we can help guide those conversations. That is enough out of me. But at the end of the day, I think that Bruce and I serving together is both good for this council and good for the greater recovery and reentry community at large.
I'm confused because I thought that you at the beginning said that you thought that that would split the community. Did I miss something there?
No. Putting me and Bruce up for a vote and splitting the vote again on the council would split the recovery and reentry community. I don't want to, I will if I have to, but I don't want to do that. Does that make sense?
Yes, but how would you propose that we elect people if we did not put them up for a vote?
No, I mean saying
So there'd be two chairs putting Bruce and Courtney up
together.
Oh, as a team.
So that,
yeah, as a team. I'm saying like if we have to go in there and like people have to vote Courtney or Bruce, that continues the split within the recovery and reentry community that I don't want to see happen.
See that being problematic if then you got to pick the next team and then the next team. You know?
So I think, Eric, I'm going to go to the same place that you're going here. So part of the issue is I hear what Courtney is saying and I hear what Gordon is saying and about we don't want to split the committee and we don't want to spend a lot of time on this. We've got a whole lot of work to do and do it. But I think when we're looking at these positions, when we're looking at making structural changes to how we govern ourselves, we can't look at personalities. We have to look at the actual positions themselves and what they will do. And hopefully we will match candidates to it. And one of the things that we can assure that the executive committee always has somebody with lived experience as part of that committee. The chair has an ability to nominate at-large individuals. And so we can always, again, hopefully a chair would always look at what is the balance of people on the committee. And I think the chair has up to 3 people they can nominate. So again, it's keeping that balance of ensuring that we have that voice of people with lived experience on the executive committee. So that can balance. But I think for me right now, I get the split and I don't want the split and I want to move forward. There's a bunch of work to do. And I think that, having 2 vice chairs may be very useful right now. We may find in 4 years it's not so useful. Right now, it may be because there's a lot of work to do, a lot of things coming forward. But I think for me, again, it's how do we look at this? How do we change the bylaws to reflect that we're not back here again having this long discussion, and base it on something longevity, not necessarily personalities. And I think I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm going to let at this point Brendan speak about legalities and the bylaws of this.
Okay, before I go, does anybody else want to say anything?
In what you're going to talk about, Brendan, I just want to say that I don't want anybody to be split either. But if you were to put, 2 vice chairs and do the vote just as we have, and even if it's split between Bruce and Courtney 50-50, I don't know how that splits the community when you have 2 people that I personally know care about 100% of the community. They don't care about 50% of the community, so
Eric, we're saying the same thing. I'm saying that if the vote is either or, me or Bruce, and we don't come together as a team to serve,
Yes, I agree. I would just think that there should be a vote. If we want to, then
Yes, of course, of course, of
Right.
course. I just don't want to go to the council meeting and say, you say Bruce, me say, Chastity say Courtney, and then we're in the same exact place. And now people have had to vote between me and Bruce. Instead, that the vote should be both of us together. I think we're saying the
And
same
I
thing.
think I can offer some suggestions here about, that kind of like Eric, I think I can offer some suggestions about it, kind of how that would look before the council, if that would be helpful. All right. Anybody else? Okay. I'm looking at the bylaws. Sometimes I refer to, sections of the bylaws and so on and read language. I'm going to hold off from doing that until people tell me they want me to do that. And then I'll just sort of describe what I'm seeing in the bylaws. But if at any time somebody, has their bylaws and they want me to talk about what I'm reading, just say so. There's a couple things, just starting with the bylaws themselves. There's one change that I can see proposing. There's another possible change that I don't think is necessary, but I'll talk about that. In general, the bylaw, I mean, not in general, specifically, the bylaws say that there has to be a chair, a vice chair, a treasurer, and a secretary. The bylaws also give the authority in a couple different places, the authority to appoint such other officers as the council may from time to time designate. And, can at that time, determine, the powers and the duties of those additional officers. And so the change that I suggest is not necessary is changing the bylaws to create a co-vice chair position. So, what I envision is, that the council have its regular election as it just did for the written, for the officers that are written into the bylaws. And if the council determines it wants to create a new position of co-chairs, co-vice chairs, that it do so, and it do so for just a particular term rather than something permanent. And that at that time, the council with specificity designate the powers and duties of the co-chairs and potentially of each particular co-chair. And so, Eric, to get to your question, I think, one way that could happen is the council could entertain a motion that, that a couple of people, for a motion that, the council create co-chairs and that a couple of people fill those roles rather than having to have competing votes about the individuals and then later on say, how about we just have those two as co-chairs? So then I can envision, a council voting with consensus with a 3/5 vote or more to say, yes, we want co-chairs and yes, we want those two people as co-chairs. And that, has the benefit of having the council be able to show its consensus if that's what it really wants. So there's a couple different ways the council can do that, but it can do it already with its existing authority. And I would recommend that if it chose to do that, it would limit it to just a particular term, like now through until the officers' terms end, to provide for the opportunity for there to be a change in circumstance or a change in personalities in the future. The thing though that I think is needed is that so the council has voted at the last meeting to have a chair and a treasurer and a secretary, and so there's a vacancy in vice chair. The bylaws address vacancies, but not fully, and this is the part I think could be updated. The council elects its officers at the annual meeting. But then later on in the sections about officers, which is Article 5, section 5.3, it says any vacancy occurring in any office of the council shall be filled by vote of the council members. And it doesn't say, when that should happen. Presumably that's after the annual meeting, because it would be the annual meeting is when the elections take place. And at some point thereafter, there could be a vacancy. So presumably the vacancy can be filled by a vote of the council members when the vacancy occurs. And what's missing is how to gather the nominations necessary for filling that vacancy. And I think that kind of gets to the issue that Joe Everett was raising at the last meeting, which is let's see, where is it? This committee's job is to, here it is. This committee's job is to solicit and submit recommendations to the council for election at the annual meeting, a slate of nominees for officers, and they have to be presented at least 30 days before the annual meeting. And my suggestion is to add to that section 6.4, just add language to that, maybe just a sentence that says, in the event of a vacancy, the governance committee shall, follow the same process, basically, in soliciting candidates to fill the vacancy. And then the council can, at the next meeting, follow the existing language in the bylaws to elect, to fill a vacancy, by vote of the council members. That, to some degree, what's happened here with the vote of the with the election of the vice chairs is sort of, what the bylaws and what the MOU is contemplating, which is the council is supposed to act by consensus. It, with this particular role, it didn't achieve consensus on this thing. And so the council's got this work to do to go back and to try to find a way to achieve consensus. It has the authority already to, try to fill this position by finding a candidate that can achieve consensus. The fact that it hasn't already, I don't think is a flaw in the bylaws. I think it's more actually the bylaws working the way they're supposed to, which is that it's showing that the council doesn't have consensus on a particular issue. That what's missing in my mind is, now that there is that vacancy, I think that this committee should have the role of soliciting, the same role it had before, which is soliciting candidates and making recommendations to the council, and doing so, at the next meeting. Conceivably, this, failure to achieve consensus on a particular officer position could happen over and over and over. It may go on until the position is filled, or it may go on until somebody says, let's not fill the position, or it may just go on at every single meeting. That's part of how the council is, I think, meant to work. It's meant to try to achieve consensus to find its goals. So my current recommendation is amending section 6.4 to give this committee the authority to, in the event of a vacancy, solicit from the council and submit recommendations to the council for candidates to fill those vacancies. So that's my spiel about the language of the bylaws. I have additional thoughts that I'd like to share about the concept of co-officers, regardless of what the position is. And I'll I just want to flag or signal that I have those thoughts that I'd like to share with the committee, but I'll hold off and see if there are any questions about the part I've already presented on.
I have a question, Brendan. I think that was an excellent summary of where we are with the bylaws. The piece that would amend the bylaws, the 6.4 amendment, would that, in your opinion, be necessary to take care of before a potential election that might reference the ability to appoint additional officers and then nominate two candidates for two vice chair positions. I mean, could almost do it in potentially in one motion. Would that, in your opinion, I would think we could go ahead and do that without your amendment to 6.4. That 6.4 amendment really kind of helps us clarify how we might get out of this situation in the future.
Yeah, so Gordon, the language that about the council's authority to create new officers, I'm looking at sections 5.2 and 5.3. I'm sorry, 5.1 and 5.2. The council may from time to time designate additional officers. I don't know that you could, and I'm not, I wouldn't counsel against giving this committee the authority to, or the role of, soliciting nominations in the event the council does create additional officer positions from time to time. But I just note that it slows the process down in the sense that the council could at some point say, look, we need additional officers, and it's June and we're deciding, to put it up to a vote in June. Then, the council, if the council wants this committee to have the sort of nomination and recommendation role for that new position or positions, it would then have to kick the issue to this committee. This committee would have to convene a meeting, solicit those nominations, and make a recommendation to the next council member. Maybe that's what the committee would want, or rather the council. But I just note that it, moves it, it adds an additional, I don't know, couple of meetings, a month or so, to the process. But it certainly could do that. But having said that, I mean, that's just my sort of read of it. If others, you're all reading this language, you all may have different suggestions.
Well, my understanding of it is that we could in fact say we need an additional officer, which is in fact the vice chair right now. And then I would agree with, no?
I think, Eric, it would be, I think because there's already meant to be a vice chair and there's a vacancy, I wouldn't call that an additional officer. I would say that's a vacancy. An additional officer would be a co-vice chair.
So we could move to fill the vacancy, and then in the same meeting, create an additional officer and move to fill that and reach the same goal at the end with the same two people who are interested. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could do that. It'd probably be one step fewer just to say, we're going to create co-chairs and fill it with these two people. But again, it gets, the question is whether this committee wants, and I think we heard at the last council meeting that there's interest in transparency around the nomination process. So the question is, should the committee, this committee, have a role in the, soliciting nominations and submitting recommendations in the event of that, that the council creates new officer positions, as Gordon suggested, as I understand it. And I see Courtney's hand up.
Courtney Brendan. Thank you, Matt. I think.
And Courtney, your voice is quite dim.
Can you guys?
It's
Can you hear me
faint,
now?
but yeah, that's fine. Yep.
Oh, sorry about that. I think that this committee should have a role in at any point when there is a stalemate on officership. I think that it should have to go back to this committee. I don't think that floor nominations are going to did or will in the future go over well. Just because I think that everyone deserves an opportunity to make a decision and have a thought process around the vote they're going to take. And I don't know that that can happen on the floor like it almost happened last time. So just for process, I think it should be kicked back to this committee if there is a failure to reach consensus on officership and that we should go through the nomination process again.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, because if people know there's two vice chairs, what's to say somebody that did not step up before may be willing to step up now, knowing that they won't have the full burden of the duties of a single vice chair. So we need to consider that as well, that there may be some volunteers who have yet to raise their hand.
So I will share with you, I'm currently getting off, but I sit on 6 nonprofit boards. And I have never seen this happen before on 6 nonprofit boards.
Do any of those boards oversee millions of dollars of opiate
Oh, yeah.
settlement money?
Well, not settlement money, but they're large organizations. Yes. That serve. Again, it's and I don't know again. So it is unique, and I have seen it work very well taking nominations from the floor. Not saying that with this group that will work, but I have seen it work. But I hear what people are saying, and so okay. So I'm going to go back to Brendan for a second, and then say a few things. So one of the things that I have concerns over is the 30-day piece. I just want to make sure that, and I agree with Courtney when others are saying that I think the governance committee, I think when there isn't a consensus, that it goes back to the governance committee. But for the next meeting, they're able to resolve some of the issue. That I don't want it to drag out. For instance, if you go by, I'm reading this, the 30-day piece, we can't even vote on next week's meeting, the vice chair. And I don't want to belabor it. I want to move forward. And I think that's what I hear other people saying. Can we come to some consensus so we can move forward, so we can get on to the business of, distributing the settlement dollars and move forward? And so that is a concern of mine. The other thing is, I hear and the vice chair is a good solution. There is a lot of work to do. We just have to define what role each of those co-vice chairs play, so that they're not duplicating work. And again, I don't know. I'm processing. So other people's thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that if we did do that, then you would meet with them. But my question is to Brendan, would that qualify as a public meeting, 3 of them meeting together? So that'd be problematic as well. Yeah. So, I mean, that seems reasonable that you meet with your vice chairs to divide up the 3 of your duties. I mean, that seems completely reasonable. But if it constitutes a public meeting, that with notice, it's problematic.
So, and just to remind folks, we need to move away from the concept of 3 people equals a public meeting.
Okay.
As I explained at the last meeting, I've moved away from that advice under FOA. There isn't like a 3-person rule.
Oh, okay.
At least I would not. I know
So-
some people think of it that way, but I no longer advise the council that it's not my view any longer that FOA is properly read to have a 3-person rule.
So if this group determined that we were going to suggest to the full council that for at least this term, we go with 2 vice chairs to fill the vacancy of chair, that we actually nominate 2 people to serve as co-chairs, that we could leave it to the chair and the 2 vice chairs to meet and determine the roles that they would play and how the workload would be divided. We could do that without a public 14-day notice.
I wouldn't recommend that, Pat. I would recommend that discussion happen as part of a committee or council meeting.
Okay.
And I can, this sort of bleeds into my thinking about, kind of what I want to say about co-officer positions, but I want to hold off on that because
Okay.
we're sort of talking about other things. And Pat, let me just address your question about, adding your point about, this committee in preparing a slate of nominees for the annual meeting has to give the council at least 30 days notice prior to the annual meeting, of the slate of nominees. The committee could make a recommendation to the council of an amendment that says in the event of a vacancy, or in the event that the council creates a new officer position, such notice shall be 14 days.
Okay.
I just wanted to point out that in the bylaws, there is specifically a 3 council member rule.
Yeah, and I flagged that and I have to change that.
Okay.
And by the way, so the reason that what I'm suggesting about the 14 days is I'm sort of contemplating, and maybe this group, would think about it differently, and I'd like to hear, your ideas about it. But what I'm contemplating is, a council meeting where the council moves to create new officer positions. At that time, the chair would then call a meeting of the governance committee in 2 weeks. The committee would meet in between the next 2 council meetings, so that at the next council meeting, that next meeting will have the benefit of the slate of nominations. Courtney, I couldn't read I couldn't read your text.
I was just going to offer that, if we amended to say that this committee has to provide in the result of a vacancy, that we have 14 days notice, that's not going to give us enough time before next week's meeting to provide those nominations to the full council. And so I was just going to offer, could the amendment to the bylaw say at the most reasonable time?
Or before the next council meeting.
Or before the next council meeting.
Yeah.
So we're not stuck with the exact date numbers, but more of a reasonable time frame.
A reasonable time frame works. Unless it doesn't work for Brendan. I don't know.
I don't have a problem with that, but I just note that when the council meets, its agenda is typically published, 14 days ahead of time. And, it would be providing the opportunity for the public to know who the nominations are. It's the next council meeting would already have on its agenda the issue of electing people to this new officer position. And so, maybe that's okay. But I'm happy to hear others, tell me I'm wrong about that.
I mean, my only, again, and I don't want to make it just about this particular time, that it's about, longevity. You can't make rule changes constantly or bylaws changes. My concern at this point is, I, in the case of what's going on right now, I think that I'm hearing people say, and I have to agree with them, I would like to get the issue resolved and move forward. And so, not that I don't want the public informed, and not that I would just like to move things forward to get this resolved, because there's a lot of work to do. And the longer we keep this going, the longer we get sidetracked on an issue that it's important, but there's a lot of other stuff that needs to be done. But that's just my thoughts.
Do you want a motion that basically says that?
That we move fast.
Can we move what you just said? I mean, I'll make that motion. I mean, I'll take the blame for it. So I would move that we at least for the interim time through November that we establish a 2 vice chair position, slot, call, I don't know what you want to call it.
Can you
So
amend?
Betsy,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Brendan.
it's so Betsy, it sounds like you're moving that the committee recommend to the council.
Yes,
Okay.
And can you amend that a motion to include this through to the next election, which is at the annual meeting?
sure. I'm just laying it out there. Help me make them, help me create, help me write,
Yeah.
craft a motion that will do what it is that we've been talking about for the past hour, and that we can move this forward.
I think Betsy is putting forward a motion to recommend to the council that the council create a co-vice chair position for the term of office ending in January of 2025.
Courtney, you took the words right out of my mouth. Thank you.
I thought that might be what you were saying.
Are you seconding my motion?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on that motion?
Yes. I just want to understand this correctly, because right now we only have 2 candidates. Technically, me and Courtney.
Mhm.
So are we going to take nominations from the floor at the next full meeting? If we did that, then yeah, certainly could nominate Bruce. And I could officially step aside. Is that what you intend this to look like? Because right now the nominations are Courtney and I. And what we're really talking about is Courtney and Bruce to be the vice chairs, which is fine. But the process around that, according to the bylaws, may be a bit tricky. So Brendan, could you address that?
Well, I think the question for this committee is whether to, include in that motion or make an additional motion to amend the bylaws to give this committee a role in developing nominations for this new position.
My intention was to create a different motion after the motion passes.
Can't hear you, Courtney.
Can you hear me now? My intention was to create a separate motion to address your concerns, Eric. So the answer is yes. I believe the intention of this committee is to put forward Bruce and myself.
I would agree. If that's
So
the,
just to clarify though, so the motion is first to create the separate position of co-vice chairs.
That was my
And
motion.
then that's your motion, Betsy, as I
Yes.
understand it.
For
And
one
then
year.
second, well, until the next annual meeting.
Mhm.
And then the second part of that same motion is that those that position, the co-chair positions, be filled by Courtney and Bruce.
That we're
No.
nominating Courtney. And that's not part of the motion, though.
That was not part of my motion, no. I
Well-
think that's a separate motion, and you can only have one motion on the floor at the same time.
I see Gordon's hand up. I'd be willing to vote on that
Gordon.
motion. I would be a yes on that motion, on Betsy's motion. But maybe we should hear from Gordon before we move forward.
I'd be prepared to vote positive, to vote yes on the motion. I think to be cleaner, we should just, vote on this motion. Then we can discuss, all right, about filling the existing vacancy and how people are nominated. I'm not too worked up about the public notice, because I certainly stated the intention at the last public full council meeting that I was going to nominate Bruce, and I had fully intended to nominate Bruce Naughton as vice chair. So people have been given some notice of who the potential candidates are, but I think before voting on the motion, the one thing we haven't done, I want to hear from Brendan. He says he has some information about the role of he wants to talk to us about the role of additional officers. That could be relevant to this motion. So I'd like to make sure everything gets on the table that Brendan wants to share with us, and then I'd be prepared to vote for vote on the motion.
Okay, I'll go ahead unless Pat tells me somebody else should go ahead.
No, this is, go for it.
Having co-officers, comes with some risks of conflict. And oftentimes in having, co-fiduciaries or anything, then you get, a couple of different people having the same decision-making authority. As we've talked about, the council has the ability to define, the roles and duties of, the co-officers. So there's some potential to mitigate that, although it's difficult for anybody to create with specificity, the duties and responsibilities that would avoid all all conceivable, problems and circumstances. But some thoughts that some circumstances that I can envision are, there is the question of succession. And we're just talking about this co-vice chair position, where we're not talking about the situation of, co-chairs or co-treasurers. So there may be other issues in those circumstances, but with the co-vice chair, there's the question of, how do you determine succession? There's the question of, if the council gives to the chair the authority to assign, duties and responsibilities to the vice chairs, it creates a risk of perceptions of favoritism or bias one particular way or the other. It creates risks of two people with the same position and the same authority having disagreements about the path forward in a given situation. And it in general, it leads, it has the opportunity to, unless well managed, lead to, additional divisions or divisions that sort of continue, down the road. I tend to avoid, and I have in the past in other work, avoided creating, co-fiduciary positions. This is a little bit different in the sense that, these people that these positions are in theory, sort of overseen by the chair, sort of overseen by the council. But, it does create risks for the chair. It creates risks for the co-chairs. It creates risks for, to some degree, the council, of continuing, division and disagreement. That's not to say that the two individuals that, the council, decides to elect, to co-officer positions can't figure it out, or that the chair couldn't, work with them to figure it out. But it's not, while there certainly is a lot of work to do, I would just suggest that to the extent the council wants to spread out that work by creating another officer position, whether it's co-positions or a separate distinct officer position, that it be careful and specific about the duties and responsibilities to avoid that overlap, to avoid miscommunications, to avoid perceptions of favoritism. Those are some of my thoughts at the moment.
I understand what you're saying, Brendan, but this is a limited time period. It's not like the end of the world. We're doing this until the annual meeting. So I think that although I certainly hear what you're saying and all of those things could be true, I think we need a path forward, and it sounds to me like this may be the path, at least for this limited period of time.
Although I appreciate that. The ones, the one suggestion I have is that the council, has, had an election of, two candidates for vice chair, and that didn't succeed. It hasn't attempted to have a subsequent election of different candidates. That is another option for the council.
So I will share with you all that as much as I think that we, could use extra hands. I a little hesitant to pick two vice chairs for a lot of the reasons that Brendan is there. But I also at this point in time know the workload, and I know that there's enough to go around. I also am concerned about splitting the council. And I want to be able to unify the council and to go forward. It is funny, this is when you're part of the public and the public wants to find a way to talk even though they can't. I just get an email and it appears that somebody is listening and talks, about communication, and actually talked about a succession plan. And again, there's always that theory that if the chair gets run over by a bus, what happens? And you want to be able to make sure that it's solid in place. But I do think I hear Brendan loud and clear. I do have concerns. To tell you the truth, going into this meeting, my suggestion was not to be two vice chairs. My plan was to really move forward as to, what we do when there's not consensus. But I hear Betsy, I heard Gordon, Courtney, Eric, all of you in regards to the workload and how we do it in communicating. My concern is if there's two vice chairs, that we're able to sit down and really define where the workload goes and how that is, because there is a concern about the risk of that position moving forward. But again, we're voting on it only to be for this year until the next annual meeting, which is actually less than a year. And so again, we're a new group. We're experimenting. We're looking at things. But I do hear you all. But again, I think for consistency and for moving forward and for rejoining the group, this may be the solution. But those are my thoughts before the vote. I don't know what anybody else's thoughts are in regards to Brendan's suggestions.
I mean, I'll get out one more thought, just to kind of clear my head. If I'm thinking, I step away from the position in the sense of moving the work forward, like we all want to do, and the understanding of lived experience. I do partially agree with Brendan that we ferreted out all opportunities to reach consensus to have one chair. And so I just throw this out there to Courtney that maybe both of us should take a step back in order to move the process forward. Maybe neither of us is the right person. I'm not even saying it's Bruce. Maybe somebody else will raise their hand, and maybe we will come up with one person. There's certainly, everybody is capable. There's people a lot smarter than me for sure on this committee. So I just throw that out there, that consider the possibility that maybe neither of us, because we cannot reach consensus, are the right people. to be sitting in this position. And maybe the right person I've said this a few times, just hasn't raised their hand yet. And maybe we can reach consensus without changing the rules, because we can't change the rules every single time. You can't come up with a consensus. As far as what happens when, you have, if we did in fact choose to elect 2 vice chairs, I personally have no issue with the chair and them getting together and figuring it out. I'm sure they will figure it out. I mean, I work in a command structure system here, so I'm just used to that. Pat's the chief. She's gonna get together with her deputies and they're gonna figure it out. That's how I look at it. So that doesn't worry me at all. But it does worry me a little bit that we're considering changing rules for a few months because we can't figure this out. When maybe the answer is right before us, which is just everybody detaching. When I say everybody, Courtney and I, we detach. I'm really trying to do that, and saying for the greater good, maybe it's neither of us right now, and we could ask for other nominations and we could find somebody. So that's just my thought. And that's not to say, Courtney, that you wouldn't be awesome, because I know how passionate you are, and I do think you're really awesome. So I just think for the greater good, maybe that this is a solution. So that's it. Just wanted to get that off my chest.
Thanks, Eric. I think I'm gonna have to respond to that. So at this time, with the information that I have available to me, I would not be willing to step down there, because I will not vote for Bruce as vice chair on its own. That being said, if there is another nomination and we want to go forward with receiving nominations, I'm open to doing that. That's where I'm at.
So that goes to my point, is we don't really know. Courtney and I said, hey, we're going to step back. Anybody else? Maybe somebody else raises their hand.
And again, my real thing is that we're voting on procedure, not personalities. And that has to really be part, is that we're voting on a procedure and how we want to move forward, not the personalities of I shouldn't say personalities, of people that are current nomination. That what we're doing is setting practice, and practice should be about practice, not about persons. You shouldn't develop a position. Again, you watch agencies do that. If they develop a position around the personality, when that person leaves, the agency often folds or it doesn't work. So we have to move it so that it's sustainable. But the current motion on the floor is about a year. It is not about sustainability. It is about the next, until the next annual meeting. So if there's no other discussion on this motion.
Just, I actually am going to vote no, just in the sense that I would like to ask the other members, knowing this information that we have now, if anybody else would be interested. And that's just the only reason why. I feel like we need to tell them this information and see if anybody raises their hand. Like I said, lots of smart people out there that might want to do it. So, in fairness to them, they don't have this information.
Gordon? You have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm going to vote yes, but with the full understanding that this is a recommendation to the council. And I'm going to ask that the motion be read back so we know exactly what we're voting on. But I believe it's essentially a motion that we would recommend creating under the authority already in the bylaws that the council create a limited time additional officership to be known as a co-vice chair. And then we would go on, if that motion passes, if that is agreed to by the council, to figure out how we elect that person and how we fill the existing vacancy. So Pat has mentioned this too, that any time we devote to this issue at the council is time taken away from discussing procurement of the $9 million in projects that we already voted, and the need to have discussion on additional projects that hopefully will be coming in from the programs committee. So I appreciate all the time this morning, but boy, I want to resolve this.
Mhm.
It's only 11, it's not even a year. It's 11 months. And I mean, there's kind of two ways to go. Either have an election, give whatever notice you want regarding how the nominations are made, and have a vote, or create this additional position and have a position that's available for both Courtney and Bruce if they're interested. So again, I'm going to vote yes on Betsy's motion. I appreciate her making it, but I do think we should reread it. And I've told you the kind of the limits of my support is that I want to see a strong consensus next week on what this council wants to do. And I don't want us spending 3 hours talking. We got too much other things to do.
Yeah, I think, Gordon, I have to agree with you. I'm not inclined to vote yes on this, but I am only to move it forward because there's a lot of work to do. But it's probably, again, for me, it almost like a Band-Aid, but for right now, it needs to be. And my suggestion would be, and it won't be, of course, it's not part of the vote, but my vote will go yes, but that the governance committee really seriously look at how we do this to not get to this point again at annual elections. But we need to move forward. So any other discussion before I ask for a roll?
Brendan has his hand up.
Just very briefly, Pat, that under section 5.2, the council at the time of designating the new position shall, determine the powers and duties of the new position. And so my suggestion is, maybe it doesn't need to burden Betsy's motion, but at some point before the meeting, that somebody come to the meeting with a proposal of those powers and duties of either the co-chairs together or the co-chairs separately.
Can I draft a suggestion of the roles of those two vice chairs that would go to the meeting next week?
Yeah, I mean, you can draft that, and I think you would just share it with everybody, and at the meeting, read it out, say this is, because the council, that would need to be part of the vote of the council anyway.
Can
we can distribute it to the council, we can add it to the agenda and distribute it
to the governance committee when I do it? If I draft it, I'm trying to think how many days I have and what I think. Okay, so can I draft it and send it to the other governance committee members for their input and then present it to the council?
It would.
Aren't you kind of getting needs on this though? Why wouldn't it just be exactly the same as the vice chair? I mean, you have two vice chairs, their job descriptions would be the same. The nuance of what you assign them, you're really getting into the weeds.
So Eric, the current language, the current responsibilities of the vice chair is that the vice chair shall perform such duties as are assigned to them by the chair and the council.
Perfect.
I mean, the council could just, it could just say that. Again, that puts the chair in the position of having to say to, co-chair, co-vice chair A, please go do this thing. co-vice chair B, please go do this thing, and so forth.
Yep. Yeah.
And that could
Don't-
be what the, what you guys want.
Yeah, that makes it real easy on you, Pat. It's their mirror. And then the three of you would get together and talk about your duties.
Except we can't get together because that's a public meeting.
No, actually, Brendan has actually said that is not the case.
No, it would be a public meeting.
That would absolutely be a public meeting.
Anything that's
So-
substantive, regardless of how many council members, should be considered a public meeting.
Yeah,
Which
the issue is whether the council is engaging in deliberations, and so if you guys are, deliberating things that affect, the transacting of the council's business, that should happen at a meeting, at a public meeting.
Oh, okay.
And I have no problem with that. That would have a public meeting with the two co-chairs and the chair deciding on who's going to do what and how that works. I don't have a problem with that being public. Because again, it needs to be defined as to where people are supposed to go and what their responsibility is. So we're not duplicating each other and we have an understanding. The problem I has is, oh, I see Courtney's hand. Courtney, go ahead.
I was just curious if it could be simple. I'm on the finance committee. Bruce is on the grants committee. I wonder if we could be assigned to attending our committees and reporting back to Pat via email on what happened in the committee so that Pat doesn't have to, but of course you can, Pat, attend those committees. And then when Pat's not available to do the chairship of the full council meeting, Bruce and I just go back and forth and chair the meeting. And I would offer that we do it on a alphabetical basis, not because my name is before his, but because that's just how most things work.
Let me ask, does anybody, I'm sorry, Courtney, I don't
Yeah.
want to interrupt. Does anybody here think that, Pat assigning duties to the co-vice chairs would stray into the realm of deliberations of the council's business?
No,
No, I don't think so.
that is procedural.
Yeah.
Procedural. It's
I think
procedural.
that's the litmus test. So, I think it's, to those, to the extent those conversations happen and it's just, look, you're already on the finance committee, please, continue with that in your role as vice chair. That doesn't sound deliberative to me. So, but it could be that Pat assigns certain duties to the co-chairs that, do have that kind of indicia of, having an effect on the council's deliberations. But at the moment, I think what I've heard doesn't sound to me like deliberations.
That's procedure. And I have to laugh. The only two people who haven't told me what committee they want to serve on next year is Courtney and Bruce.
Well, I was waiting to determine what happened on this.
You and Bruce are the only two people I have heard.
How about you
Anyway.
just tell us what to serve on?
Do we know whether Bruce is willing to serve as a co-vice chair?
We know he's willing to put his name in nomination for vice chair because he agreed to it at the last meeting.
Right.
So the answer is no. We don't know that, Brendan.
Well, that doesn't affect Betsy's motion, though.
Doesn't. Again, we're voting on we try to pull personalities out of it, and we're voting on procedures and how we want to operate. We don't want to base it on personalities because then it gets wishy-washy. So we have a nomination on the floor and we have it seconded. Betsy's made a nomination. Courtney has seconded, and can somebody read it back? Gordon has asked for a read back before a vote.
I was going to ask to make sure I have it written right. I have to recommend to the full council that the council create a co-vice chair position whose term ends in January 2025.
That would be, that would be what I have. I made the motion and Courtney seconded it.
So, we have any more discussion on that? If not, take a roll, please.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Courtney Gary Allen,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Eric Small,
No,
Gordon Smith.
Yes,
4 yeas, the motion carries.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Eric. I understand why you're voting that way. So I appreciate it. All right. So next step. So the motion said that we're recommending that to the council at the next board meeting to take that vote. The next step is, are we placing names in nomination at that meeting, or are we waiting for the March meeting to do that?
I would like to
What?
place names as soon as possible.
well, I
That's
think
what
it is the question, Pat, whether we would place the names in nomination, then people would have notice, and then we'd vote in at the March meeting, you mean? Is that the
I'd
question?
prefer that we vote in February, but
Well, so would I. I mean, but if the council felt otherwise, we at least get it done in March. But again, I think we've given sufficient notice to people. I mean, there's only 15 potential candidates. I don't think that the whole entire state of Maine is holding with bated breath about this election. I think they're really watching us to see us get money out the door and take care of people. So I think we got to resolve it as quickly as possible.
so I would like to be able to say at the March meeting, at the February meeting, if the council voted to approve this piece, that we then at that same meeting say that the governance committee would like to put before the committee Courtney and Bruce, with the understanding that Eric has decided to withdraw his name. And Eric, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
That is correct.
And
So
I
we can
think
say that Eric has withdrawn his name, and then we put those names for the council to vote at the February meeting. That's what I would like to do. I always don't get my way, so.
oh, and then the council could vote yay or nay on whether they're willing to go ahead with this. And
Yeah.
I think I can actually speak for Bruce, that I believe he would willingly serve with Courtney as co-vice chair if that's the wish of the council. I've talked pretty extensively with him. I think he would prefer to be the vice chair, and probably Courtney would too. But this is a way to advance the work of the council, I think, and I think both take the high road and be excellent co-vice chairs. So I don't worry that we're going to have another stalemate because Bruce won't want to do this. I don't think you should feel that way. I feel quite strongly that he, while he might prefer a different course, that he'd be willing to do this. So I would love to have the election. I imagine under those circumstances that one could be nominated for this, fill the vacancy, one could be nominated to fill the new appointment, and the election, I suspect, would be unanimous.
Does that sound like a consensus that we have as a committee, that that's how that could go?
It does.
I'll
I do.
go along with it.
Eric?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I would agree with that 100%. I just wanted to reiterate to really the public to understand the reason why I'm stepping down is to move this forward. It's not for my my loyalty or anything like that. I recognize the need to get this taken care of, and that those two people are certainly publicly have, with their lived experience and recognizing that that is important to many people. And I step back, not for any reason but that. And I know that several people sent letters of support for me, and people have privately supported me. And I just want, it's important that they know that this isn't even about any of us, actually, as we all know. So we'll get this done at the next meeting, hopefully, and get some money out.
And Eric, I appreciate the fact that you're willing to step forward to move forward, to step back to move forward, and it is greatly appreciated, and only speaks of your dedication for the committee and getting things out. And again, thank you for that. It's appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brendan, did we do anything that makes lawyers go crazy? Are you okay?
I am fine. I'm not a council member, so you don't have to ask me that question.
Yeah, but we do have to ask you as the lawyer. I want to make
Yeah,
sure
you didn't break any laws.
didn't
Not that
break
I'm
any
aware of.
laws. Okay. Orange is not my color.
The only
Okay.
thing, does the committee want to, amend the bylaws in the way I suggested about in section 6.4 about, giving the committee a role in the event of a vacancy, or a new position? Again, don't want to bog down what the committee's trying to do in this particular moment.
I can I
Gordon?
be recognized? I would take your advice, Brendan. If you believe that that would be helpful to us in our future work, I'd fully adopt it. So I think it's one we can easily defer to council and take your recommendation.
Is
Okay,
that
I'll draft some language to add to the end of 6.4 and we'll circulate it. I think probably I'll send it to Pat, who can then circulate it to the full council, because the council, would need to, vote as a whole to amend it
Mhm.
pursuant to section 8.1.
Okay, so we don't need a motion for that change. You're just gonna send a recommendation and then we'll vote on it at the February council meeting? Oh, well, we have to
Yeah.
wait till March.
I mean, do you guys want to move that? It's fine with me if you do.
I think that's
I
what
don't
I've
know.
heard. Yeah.
I would
So-
so move. I would so move.
So Gordon has moved that we make that change in the bylaws. Did I hear a second, Betsy?
Yep, you did.
Can we clarify the change? What is the change?
Yeah, what's the motion? Sorry.
The change would be to add language at the end of section 6.4, which says, and I'm making this up on the fly, in the event of a vacancy in any office of the council, the governance committee, shall solicit from the council, prepare and submit recommendations to the council for election at the next council meeting, a slate of nominees for such vacancy.
So, point of clarity, that would mean that we do not have floor nominations in the event of a future tie or whatnot. It would just automatically go back to this committee.
Yeah,
Said
I think that's right, Courtney. In the event that a vote for an officer position fails, then there's a vacancy in the position.
So then
Okay.
it goes back to governance.
I'll vote yes.
Okay, well, in a second. So any other discussion? No other discussion. Haley, can you call a roll? You're muted.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Courtney Gary Allen,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Eric Small,
Yes.
Gordon Smith.
Yeah.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much for that. So I was going to discuss a little bit about the helping people understand the Freedom of Information Act and how we would do that. But you've been here long enough. I'm going to save that for another meeting. If that's okay with everybody, we did tell the council that this committee would come up with a sort of an education package, short, sort of one pager that explained what their responsibility was. But I'm going to hold off on that. You've spent an hour and a half, over an hour and a half now, of your time. So I am going to make that decision to leave that, if that's okay with everybody else. And is there any other business to come before governance?
No, but I would think then that maybe we'd have a governance committee meeting between the February and March meeting
Yeah.
and discuss just that issue. We've actually been educated a little bit today about it. It's really coming down to what's procedural, administrative versus what's deliberative. I also think there's a little room there to talk about people like Ben and I in the positions that we're in when we're out doing our regular work and
Yeah.
and that not being construed as a meeting of the council. So yeah, as long as we have a meeting of the council of this committee sometime between those two meetings, that'd be. I think
I will get
we've had
working
enough
on.
today.
I will get working on a date that works for all of us, but we are all set with that.
Courtney does have her hand up.
I'm sorry, I have a question, 2 questions. First question is, while we're having this discussion, I particularly need some thoughts from Brendan or from somebody, where the line is. Maybe this is a one-to-one conversation with Brendan, but like, I'm in a meeting with another, I'm in a private Zoom meeting with a bunch of different people with Gordon, and we're both members of the council, and the community wants an update on the work of the council. Are we allowed to talk about what happened at the previous meeting, provide updates about what we spent money on, etc.? Or is that a public meeting?
Courtney, I think in
Because
that
we're both in our
circumstance,
role as professions.
yeah, it's a different issue there. I think in that circumstance, you know, you or other council members would be reporting on the council's work, not engaging in deliberations about how you would vote or how you would handle, you know, a particular application or issue or, you know, something coming before the council in the future. But I note that Pat has talked in the past about, you know, who can represent the council. I don't know how prescriptive the group wants to be about that, because I think the point, you know, the public does, you know, has the ability to go up to the council members and talk about your work. And I think that's part of the job. So, you know, I think in a circumstance where a legislative committee invites the council to address it about the council's work, you know, it's appropriate there to have, you know, a particular officer designated to do that. But I think, you know, if Courtney, you're attending a meeting of, you know, a group of people who are involved in this work in you know, some community in Maine, and they say, hey, you're on the council, can you tell us what's going on there? I think you can probably speak to that. I think, you know, so anyway, I'll just leave it there.
Okay, I just wanted clarity on that. That's how I assess the situation as well, but just wanted to make sure, not trying to break any ethics here. And
You
then
know,
the second,
and I just invite other council members to weigh in on whether they, you know, share that perspective.
Yeah, that's what I do. If someone asks me, you know, anything the council has voted on is public because the meetings are public. So anything we've discussed in a public meeting is already public knowledge. So if somebody says, hey, what's the council doing? I can say, you just spent $9 million and this is where, again, it's public information. So it's nice that people know who you are, that you're on the council and ask the questions. That's how I look at it.
okay, great.
I
The other
agree.
question was just a logistical question. Did we need a motion to provide the slate of me and Bruce, or we good? No? Okay.
I don't think so. Because I'm just going to say it's not the council voted. I want to say it's a recommendation of the council.
Okay, that's fine. I just didn't want to get to the council meeting and miss a spot.
Any other questions, concerns? I will get back to you on picking either Mary or I will get back to you with some possible dates for a meeting in between the February and March meeting, so we can discuss just what Courtney was talking about. So other than that, we will adjourn this meeting.
Right. Thanks, Bob.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.